cloud. And I'm gonna share screen now so that we can scroll as we go. Oh, and there's Renee trying to come in again. Oh, crumbs. Where'd she go? I'm gonna stop share so I can let her in. Okay, can everybody see the screen?
Yep, I can.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Renee, did we catch you? I tried to admit you twice. Hello.
How many people do we have?
7 according to what I see here. And it looks like Renee is in, but she's not in on her phone yet or on audio. Which I bet means she's going to try again. All right, well, we'll get started with this because Joey and Martino's stuff is up first for comments. So I thought it worked okay the last time for me to just read and then everybody stop as we go to make comments, additions, edits. We've got a lot less to go through today, which is good, and Joe Martino has a commitment at 8:30. So we'll try to go as efficiently as we can. I don't know where Renee keeps going, but she'll come back, I guess. Okay. Section 6, local identity, historic landmarks and artifacts. In the previously mentioned community visioning event hosted by Branding in 2019, local identity and historic landmarks ranked very high in importance among participants, 91% and 82% important respectively. It is important, I need a better word choice there, therefore, to properly identify those historic landmarks and how they have contributed to local identity over time. Thompson is extremely fortunate to have an active historical society, and sections 6.1 through 6.4 of this document rely heavily on their contributions. The historic districts and sites below are those which the THS have identified as the most important in the hearts and minds of Thompson. Thompson Hill Historic District. This historic village center had a documented Native American longhouse at the summit of the hill. Reverend John Eliot, writing before the King Philip's War, mentioned nearly 100 inhabitants that should be belonging to the Quinitisset area tribe that settled in his praying town. And Joe, I added a footnote there because I don't think that that's particularly common knowledge what that is, but that's okay.
Okay. Yep.
Later, the first colonial settler on Thompson Hill built his tavern near the remains of the old longhouse. The first congregational church was soon erected, and Thompson became a parish of Killingly before eventually, here we go, here's Renee again, before eventually breaking away in 1785 and forming the independent town of Thompson. Major Robert Thompson, an influential Englishman and large landholder in what became Thompson, gave his name to the new town in large part for his help in securing support from England for the colonists in times of trouble. Conveniently located at the intersection of the New York-Hartford-Boston route and the Providence to Springfield Turnpike, as many as 20 carriages passed daily through the busy little town in the years prior to the coming of the locomotive. Distinctive homes were erected in a variety of housing styles around a stately town common green, including Federal, Italianate, Tudor arts and crafts, Queen Anne, Victorian, and Greek Revival styles. With the first train coming through on Thanksgiving Day, 1839, the Thompson Hill Village began a long period of decline as a commercial district, but in its place, the Hill then became a destination for the rich and famous. Mansions and manor houses were erected, and visitors from across the country escaped from the hot cities to enjoy Thompson's small town amenities, green scenery, and the fresh summer air declared to be more wholesome than that at Newport, Rhode Island.
Scroll.
Scroll.
Thank you. Scrolling in the right direction would help. In 1987, the Thompson Hill District was added to the National Register of Historic Places Included in the district is the Third Thompson Congregational Church, built in 1856, overlooking the magnificent common, maintained since 1845 by the Venerable Village Improvement Societies.
That
The
should be
common features several-
society. That should be society, not plural.
Singular? Okay. Find it on my document. Where'd it go? There it is. Society. The common features several historic elm trees, survivors of the catastrophic Dutch elm disease. Also in the district are the 1902 Old Library, the 1842 Old Town Hall, the 1840s William H. Mason House, several historic school buildings, and the 1814 Vernon Styles Inn.
I would just, excuse me, question whether you should put that it's a historic district at the very top. I mean, where you say the National Register of Historic Places, somehow put that up in that first line under number 1. That's the point, is that it's got recognition.
But isn't this chronological? This is kind of chronological, I think.
But all right, so if you go number 1, Thompson Hill District, and then in parentheses, National Register of Historic Places.
That would make sense. You can make that, putting it right in the title might help it a little clearer.
In the heading, yeah.
I thought
Okay.
it was in the title.
Something to give it prominence.
Yes.
Yeah, I can do that. 2, the North Grovnerdale Historic Mill District, which is also on the register, right, Joe?
Yes.
So we'll do that in kind. North Grovnerdale was originally called Fisherville after Mr. William Fisher started a small textile mill in 1825 on the French River. The Fisherville Mill and associated water privileges were purchased by Dr. William Grosvenor, who also purchased other mills further south. Near a mill site then called Masonville, he built a large new mill in 1868 and renamed the entire village Grovnerdale. 3 miles north, he built a much larger brick mill in 1872 next to the Fisherville Mill and renamed that village North Grovnerdale. Around 1896, the small Fisherville Mill was taken down and replaced with a massive brick weave shed attached to the 1872 mill to form a grand manufacturing complex. The mill produced fine cotton fabrics and shirting. The Grovnerdale Company was a successful textile business in Thompson until the 1940s and contributed heavily to the World War II effort with needed textile products. Following the war, it continued as a textile enterprise until the 1954-1955 period, when floodwaters and lower cost competition combined to end textile manufacturing in the building. Dr. Grosvenor built sturdy worker housing on both sides of the river. These homes were occupied by groups of immigrant workers with neighborhood names such as Swede Village, Greek Village, 3 Rows, and the Long Blocks, each filled with immigrant workers bringing their own religious and cultural practices. High-quality single-family houses at the north end of the village were occupied by skilled specialists and supervisors. The mill and surrounding mill village has survived intact and was listed, on the National Register of Historic Places in 1993 because it remains a fine example of the textile mill village. As of this writing, there are plans in the works to restore the magnificent mill building and convert its use to 300-plus market-rate apartments with some mixed-use amenities. The French River near the mill has a V-shaped dam holding back the French River, creating a most scenic water vista. On both sides of the heavily wooded valley, bald eagles and an occasional osprey can be seen lifting heavy fish from the water, drawing bird watchers and hikers to the trails on the water's edge. A visit to Pond Lily, with the enigmatic remains of the Camp Arrow Boy Scout shack, is a highlight for many youngsters. Pond Lily requires no fishing license for children under the age of 18. The serenity of the scenery is breathtaking, with the visitor's magic spell broken only occasionally by the powerful slap of the tail of a beaver swimming nearby. And Joe, this is highlighted here because Karen pointed out that they're not actually launching. Oh, so I already made this change. Many visit the French River north of the mill complex to launch their canoes and kayaks at Heritage Park is how I amended that, but that's still not great. Behind the former Knights of Columbus Hall, paddling slowly down, so this needs to change. I like that there's a button on this passage with a recreation aspect, that this, I think, needs to be more accurate. Can anybody help me out here?
Former Knights of Columbus? I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, it's some other thing now. They lost their charter with the KFC.
Yeah, it's called Club, and there's a number after the word Club. It's for sale, by the way.
Is it?
Interested. Yeah, it just came on the market like 3 days ago.
Interesting.
Yeah. $350, $375.
Maybe if you just say something about off Route 12 and not mention the building.
Yeah, but everybody knows where the KFC is, so I think it's
All
accurate
right.
to say form.
Okay.
Well, I'm more, what's hanging me up more is what is
Yeah.
this statement? Because it was originally, you know, that Wilsonville Mill area was what was referenced, but that's not accurate, and it is in any case in question right now. Oh, Charlie's coming in.
You might want to say there's something about public parking behind the former hall where people can launch. You know, that there is a parking lot and a trail that leads off of there.
And when one puts in there, where does one go? Does one go north? Does one go south? Where does one paddle?
You go north to the mill. I mean the stone building at the dam in Wilsonville, but then you turn around and you have to come back.
So you enjoy the pond. You're really enjoying the pond by.
Right. I mean, that's why we were talking about a boat launch and that plans for the boat launch up there by the Wilsonville by the dam, because people, but right now you're trespassing if you put in up there.
Okay.
All right. One side is an active rail line and the other side is where the stove shop was if we can get a boat launch.
Yep.
Where is Heritage Park?
What park?
Heritage Park is apparently the name of that public park area behind the KFC.
Really? I've never heard it called that. So
I only know that because I've been reading about our parks. But if nobody else calls it that, we will refer to it some other way.
It is the Heritage Park. It is part of, it connects to Riverside Park, but it is, we got grant funding and it is Heritage Park.
Okay.
So,
And then from there, there's the North Grovnerdale Pond Walk, where we have the easement on along the river.
It's like the continuation of the trail from Riverside.
Right.
Right. Okay.
I thought the
See if I can
idea was good.
shoehorn that in there. I'm sorry, what was that?
I was just going to suggest, I thought the parking idea was good, so it gives a reason why we're mentioning that hall, with good parking, with excellent parking.
Public parking.
Public parking.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I think I can get all that in there. Anybody else have anything to add on that particular section?
I don't think it's downstream anymore. You're actually going the other way. Or you don't even have to mention the direction.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Charlie Obert is raising his hand. Okay, Charlie.
That dam came up in discussion at the Inland Wetlands meeting last night. It is in serious disrepair, and the low water level as a result of the drought has pointed out the fact that none of the water is going over the spillway. It's dropping behind those big granite blocks and coming out. The state has been notified, and there's some sort of motion underway to find out what would the emergency response be? If that dam fails with a flood behind it, it's going to be a catastrophic event downstream. And one of the conversational points was that if the people that own that, and it's owned by an LLC that seems to be trying to do some sort of a dodge on it, but if they do not fix it to the satisfaction of the state, then the state will probably come in and do, I guess, what they did up at on the Quinnebog at Fabian. They just kind of broke the dam apart, but not completely. Just so that you know about that long term going forward. And I just got finished with another meeting and connected in.
Well, that is a good point, Charlie. Something that needs to probably be added in an action item somewhere.
I agree.
That's a good call, Renee.
Amy St. Ange was in the background at our meeting, and I pointed out the fact that the man that wants to develop the Riverside Mill keeps pointing to that mill pond and the waterfall and the attractiveness of it. And I pointed out to her that if we don't get a resolve on this, it's just one more thing. How are we going to convince this guy to? We really want him to come in and then redevelop the mill. It just seems like suggestions drop into a bucket and never get heard from again.
All right. I think that's that's good information, Charlie and Renee. I think you're right. We should add that somewhere in here as an action item, whether it's in section 6 or somewhere else, depending on context, we can decide, but I've got a note in it here.
Well, on that, put the same note on the action item for the boat launch.
Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, I had sort of scribbled something along those lines already, but yes, those two items, I think.
That is a point. If the dam at behind the KF Knights of Columbus is removed or mitigated, then the pond is dramatically changed, and it might lend itself more towards a kayak run that could start at Wilsonville and go all the way down to Mechanicsville. Or no, there's the other dam at
Laney.
Yeah,
there's a couple of things in the way there, I think.
Yeah, there's at least one more dam in the way where they ripped down the Beldings Mill.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't kayak or canoe. People who do, I think, like to go longer distances than. But just food for thought.
Okay. All right, moving on to number 3, the Great 1891 4-engine wreck site and airline trail. On the foggy morning of December 4th, 1891, 2 trains collided near the small rail station in East Thompson, Connecticut. With wreckage strewn across the tracks, the station operators knew that other trains were en route from the south on the same line and ran back with a lantern to warn them. Unfortunately, it was too late, and 2 more trains collided in rapid succession with the smoking wreck of the first locomotive collisions. Mercifully, only 3 men died that fateful day. I thought it was 4, Joe.
3.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. I thought it was 1 for each train.
I thought it was 2 and 1 was missing.
Well, you'll see that a little later in the story.
Okay.
Today, the old rail line has been repurposed as the Airline State Park Trail, running from Portland to Thompson in Connecticut, continuing to Douglas, Massachusetts as the Southern New England Trunkline Trail. In East Thompson, many come to visit the famous site of the 4-engine wreck to hear local rail buffs tell its story. Some visit on Halloween when the ghost of one of the deceased, Mr. Rath, supposedly returns to find his lost keys. That's the missing body, Mr. Rath?
Never found. They only found his keys.
Wow.
Nothing left but his keys. I'm just going to add that he's the one who was never found. Never found.
Well, the
That
name.
may as well
Mr.
tell the
Rath-
whole story.
Yeah, Mr. Rath's name's pretty interesting too, because he's supposedly
Rath,
not
Rath.
happy. Yeah, he's not happy. The wrath of Mr. Rath.
Oh.
That'd be a good T-shirt.
Raff.
No,
Make them for Halloween for the Historic Society.
He was disappeared. All we found was his keys. You know.
Yep.
The keys to wrath.
A healthy walk to the northeast from the wreck site leads to the tri-state marker where the Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Massachusetts state lines meet. This rural area attracts wonderful wildlife and recalls the wildness that George Washington wrote about when he came through Thompson in 1789. In fact, President Washington stopped in East Thompson for breakfast at the Jacobs Tavern and was so unimpressed that he wrote, "Not a good house," in his private journal. The site of Washington's unfortunate breakfast is today the third hole at the Thompson Speedway golf course. It's a good button. Moving on to number 4, the Thompson Speedway. NASCAR race fans may not realize that the first meeting of the founders of NASCAR took place at the historic Thompson Speedway. The famous Indy of the East was the first paved banked oval in the nation. Following the Great Hurricane of 1938, the many downed pine trees were used in the construction of the bleachers, side rails, and clubhouse for the racetrack. Opening in 1940, the track featured the leading racers of the age. The Honig family has operated the oval since 1938, and the latest generation still make their homes in Thompson and the surrounding towns. After the war, soldiers purchased, what was that?
Would you correct the 1938 to 1940? I'd rather, the first race 1940, and let's just leave it at that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. After the war, soldiers purchased the European Maseratis and Ferraris they saw during the war and wanted to race them in America. Sensing an opportunity, the Honig and Weaver families created a raceway road course next to the oval Speedway. There were various road configurations over the years, some incorporating the oval. Today, the Honig family operates a modern raceway next to the historic oval. To complement the racing, there is an 18-hole golf course and restaurant. The annual swap meet is a local favorite, drawing crowds looking for an old car part or some new tool.
Is swap with an A?
Well, the word swap is spelled with an A, but I didn't know if that's like a construction that they use, so I left it.
I botched it.
With an O? Okay.
I screwed it up.
So it's just a typo. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Well, all right.
Nope, no problem. Number 5, West Thompson Dam and Reservoir. Constructed in the 1960s following the destructive floods of 1936, 1938, and 1955, the West Thompson Dam was built by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to protect Thompson and downstream towns from future floods. After moving many homes from the old West Thompson village, this is highlighted. Dennis Blanchett sent me a note today that he didn't really know where this particular factoid came from. He sent me what the actual engineering language is for it.
It came from the man who operated the dam from the Army Corps of Engineers. I could verify it if you want, but it's not so critical to the story. You can
I just, the engineering language was not graceful, so I didn't change it to anything, but I still have it highlighted here, so I'll figure something out there.
Yeah, just take it.
Holding the water.
Out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Holding the water back in a vast water containment system organized by the U.S. government. The massive complex today is the site of a beautiful lake with campgrounds, hiking trails, and scenic vistas both upstream and downstream of the Quinnebog River. The Quinnebog forms one side of a famous Nashaway, a Native American word that describes the land between two merging rivers. The other side of the Nashaway is the nearby French River, which flows into the Quinnebog just south of the dam complex. From the terrible tragedy of the floods came the scenic lake and family-friendly natural vista that attracts many to Thompson. All right, do we have anything we want to add to either of these? Add, edit, change? Anything here?
We want to embellish any of the story about the West Thompson Dam discussing Mrs. Ramsdale.
I like that.
I mean, that is a great story for a lot of people.
Yeah,
I could
send a couple of paragraphs on that.
You're up.
When I
Yeah.
read this, I was thinking there was going to be a sentence or two regarding that, and when I didn't read it, I was a bit disappointed. So I think it would be great to add her. We could pepper the story with Mrs. Ramsdell.
Definitely would be colorful.
Yes, absolutely. That's what I was looking for. Yep.
Remind me, Tara, because I did join a few minutes late. Is this just history? Where do we touch on the part about the West Thompson where there's the what we
So
can kayak,
the
all of that
section,
stuff.
the section 6 is the section on local identity. So it's starting with the history and putting it in context that when our residents in whatever the engagement exercises are, have identified local identity and historic landmarks or historic character is important, what do those things mean? What are the things that are important to local people? What do they represent? So that's why I asked Joe to write some of this stuff up. And, and even based on the feedback from the first meeting where some individual statements were made about the landscape or some historic place names or whatever, the impetus seemed to be to give it that backstory and that color to make the document more interesting to read for people who might be reading it casually. I would say that you can also see that as being a sort of a soft tool for developers, to make the place interesting, not just a piece of property they may be looking at.
So I guess in the section where you're dealing with outdoor recreation, there's a whole other section that's going to talk about the West Thompson Dam again and the opportunities. Is that right?
I would presume so, yes, once we get to the real meat of the outdoor recreation stuff, which is going to have a fleshed out section just like this does. In other words, it's not something that we're just touching on and leaving in places. It's also going to have its own dedicated set of concerns and action items.
Okay.
Yep.
I have a question for Joe about the Ramsdale family. Was it at the time that they constructed the dam that they found that steam locomotive in the barn and all the memorabilia that we now have in the room in the Turtle Outbuilding?
No, Frank Ramsdell always was interested in trains, and he heard of a great deal. In 1937, he drives up the Main and buys the last Portland locomotive and hauls it down on a truck.
And then he kind of hid it until when? When they built the dam?
Well, he hid it to keep it from getting scrapped during World War II, first of the reasons. So he hid all materials all over his farm, trying to prevent it from being turned into bullets and guns.
Yeah. I like that, and I wonder if maybe I don't remember the exact term that I heard, but something about the eccentricity of the people that were there as a footnote that Alice was purported to have met the Army Corps with a loaded shotgun, and her brother or her father, whoever, had the train stashed away in the woods. And these are kind of really colloquialisms that I think might be worth a paragraph.
Yeah, I agree.
I'll put it in. I'll send a paragraph or two, and then you can edit as you like.
And we do expect that perhaps this year they will finally finish up that public television production about the old number 9. If that happens, we could link that into this document as well. But
yeah, you're right.
Yep. All right. So moving on, partly to be cognizant of Joe's time as well, you may note, for those of you who happen to be looking at the table of contents, that there was a section called 6.2 Architecture in the Built Environment. I've decided to scrap that, not because I don't think it's important, because I do, but because there is no architectural specialist on this working group. And I mean, I just don't have enough background to make any intelligent statements about, you know, the relationship of architecture to local character, which is why I wanted to include it. And the idea of the design guidelines that were added to the zoning regulations rewrite. I wanted to tie that in, but I just don't think that I have any expertise to do it, and nobody has jumped up and said, yes, please, let me tackle this examination of our local architecture. Joe did provide something for me, but as I read it, I think it belongs more in the housing section. And I'm going to try to feather it in there. Does anybody want to take a stab at writing a short piece about the nature of the local architecture, the character, and, you know, how that contributes to the visual landscape?
Sarah, did you ask Steve Lewis?
I didn't ask Steve Lewis particularly. When when we were at that MISRAC meeting at the gazebo, and I said, hey, who wants to be a part of this? He kind of pointedly said he didn't want to take on another project. And he did take on another project to help me anyway. He's measuring
Right.
65 for me. So
Right.
I don't want to impose. I'll ask him again tomorrow, but I'm anticipating that answer is no.
Well, we could at least ask him if he could supply a couple sentences, and if he says no, then that would be my only suggestion to ask him.
Tara?
Yeah, I'm going to see him tomorrow, both at MISRAC and later in the afternoon. He's going to go back and finish the measure at 65 for me.
Tara, what if you just included like a series of photos?
Not a bad idea.
But Steve takes the
So,
great
like-
photos too.
So more of a photo essay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
with a
maybe-
sampling of the buildings on the hill and the mill, and you know what. This doesn't have to be an architectural lesson. You just want to sample it.
Yeah.
Right,
That
yeah.
might be a way to get him, Terry, is just to ask him for a few shots. Remember, he gave us those great ones of the mill, so
Yeah.
he might be willing to take a walk around the common and take some shots over there.
And Joe, I'm willing to bet you also have some stock photos, although many of them might be older.
Yeah, I have probably all of Stephen's photos too. If he doesn't provide them to you, I can dig in our archives and get them. So just consider me a
Okay.
strong plan B if he doesn't come through.
All right, so I'm making a note here. I'm going to add a 6.2 that is actually just a photo essay with maybe some
I had a thought though.
captioned comments. Yeah.
Wouldn't there be, and of course a lot of our buildings haven't changed, so there's a lot of information in those two books, The Echoes of Thompson. I'm almost guessing there might be some, Joe, that not that you have to do it, but there might be some good descriptions in there that we could piece together, because you talk about every village and that kind of thing. I don't know it obviously that well, but thought maybe, I mean, I think it needs more than just pictures, to be honest with you. And if there's something from those books we can pull, maybe?
Yeah, we'll piece together stories for each of the ones that are selected.
Okay. All right, so I've got a note to add something back in to satisfy that need, whatever that final form is. All right, so this will go back to being 6.3, Thompson Historical Society and Advocacy. Founded in 1968, the Thompson Historical Society, THS, currently curates 3 museum rooms inside the original 1909 Turtelot Memorial High School and manages 2 buildings on Thompson Hill, the 1842 Old Town Hall, and the 1902 Old Town Library. The goal of THS is to perpetuate the memory of those who once lived in this quiet corner of land. This is accomplished by preserving physical artifacts, collecting stories, documents, photographs, recordings, and video, and being the designated town historians. In this role, THS brings a reasonable approach to historic preservation. Not everything historic can be saved, but Thompson has shown a special ability to preserve and/or reuse historic structures. THS has taken on a role to push the people of Thompson to consider the full range of possibilities. I'm making a note here. Rather than just calling in the wrecking balls. While many buildings have been restored in place, not all could be maintained in situ. Some of Thompson's buildings and artifacts today stand in other places, most notably the 1830s Thompson Bank, now at Old Sturbridge Village, the Kenny Store of Mechanicsville, now assembled at the Turtelot Memorial High School, the West Thompson Methodist Church, taken apart piece by piece and moved to the Belmont School, Belmont, Massachusetts, and lastly, the oldest surviving Thompson-built house, the nearly 300-year-old Nichols Homestead, which still stands today in Gloucester, Mass.
Tara?
This tradition of strong, yes?
Just didn't know, and maybe gets to it later. Right at the top of this piece, do you want to say where it says the 1902 Old Town Library, now the Ellen Larned Museum, or is that tied in somewhere later? It doesn't have a new name, right? It does or it doesn't?
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
It's mentioned.
But it kind of like we did with
No, it doesn't really mention that. Yeah, so say to me again what you have in mind, Renee.
So the Old Town Library now the home to, or how did you want to word that, Joe? Now the Ellen Larned Museum?
Yeah, you have two choices. So now the Thompson Museum or now the Ellen Larned Memorial Building. It's up to you. Which of the two would you prefer?
I like the Memorial Building.
Okay.
Okay. Got it.
But if we do that, then I think it begs us to say the Memorial Building, which currently houses the Thompson Museum, because we have that Civil War stuff in there. We've got lots of memorabilia that goes beyond Ellen Larned. So yes, she inspired it, and the building wouldn't be there without her, and certainly she deserves recognition. But then beyond that, it is the function of the museum.
Okay. Well, I think there's a way to word it that you can include both in that spot.
You can. A comma or a semicolon or something.
Oh, I've got the note. I'll get it in there. Speaking of which, this tradition of strong advocacy for historical preservation in Thompson goes back to a single remarkable woman, Miss Ellen Larned. Born into a very literate and educated Thompson family in 1825, Ellen's passion was to learn all there was to know about Thompson's past. Outgrowing the town, her research soon included many neighboring towns and villages. She published historic papers on many topics and then released her classic 2-volume History of Windham County. In 1870, she was the first woman to be inducted into the Connecticut Historical Society. In her last years of life, she was a powerful voice in establishing a free library in town for both educational and historical purposes, as well as an advocate for the creation of a free public high school. In recognition for her efforts, she was granted the privilege of placing the cornerstone in 1907 for the Turtelot Memorial High School. The Thompson Historical Society is proud to carry on the enormous historical tradition created by Ellen. The town makes a point to include the Historical Society on relevant commissions and committees. Society board members representing a range of backgrounds regularly participate in many town activities. Importantly, THS works diligently to activate volunteers of all ages to join on restoration projects or to take part in open house events at the 1842 Old Town Hall as a singer in a music hall, a chaperone for second graders learning to use a turkey quill pen and ink, or as a cashier in the gift shop during the winter holiday season. Is there anything else you want to add in that, Joe? Particularly in your advocacy role, I would say.
We're getting a lot of press here. I'm pretty.
Well, you deserve it.
Yeah, I'm pretty good with it. Okay, right now.
Okay.
But I think we should consider saying membership to the Historical Society. You can get information on their website. You're right, Joe. You got a lot of ink there, but don't miss the opportunity to close the deal.
Okay. We can put that on our Facebook page or our historical site web.
Yeah, I'll link a jump in there somewhere.
Thank you.
All right. We start to modernize. 6.3, which is going to be 6.4 again. Villages. As is common in New England, Thompson is comprised of a number of small named villages. These districts within the larger town do not have independent municipal representatives, such as an alderman within a city ward. Instead, the villages formed organically around centers of activity, such as the mills or the small school districts. Mill villages in particular commonly developed along the paternalistic model put in place by Samuel Slater and his contemporaries. The 10 villages of Thompson are, and there they are. Because Thompson is blessed with several brooks and 3 powerful rivers, 8 of its villages developed around sizable mill operations, with only the East Thompson and Thompson Hill village centers formed to different purposes. Thompson Hill was important as an early business center at the crossroads for the Boston to Hartford and the Providence to Springfield turnpikes. Once the locomotives came through, the mill villages, especially the Grovnerdales, replaced the economic and political power of the Hill. East Thompson was noted for its rail connection to the Webster-Dudley area and connections to New York, Boston, Putnam, and Hartford. No longer do village post offices serve these communities, but a certain allegiance to village identities remains. Thompson residents often identify their village rather than Thompson in response to the question, where do you live? This does foster a certain neighborhood identity and may strengthen some community bonds within the villages. However, the consolidation to a single public school and the shift to an automobile-centered oriented culture marks the village identities as a relic of another era. It has been observed that the continued use of the village names instead of Thompson creates confusion when searching for local businesses or real estate listings online, and may even contribute to fragmentation of the community as a whole by positioning some villages as better neighborhoods than others. A possible way to resolve the respect for local history with the need for a single community identity may be through the addition of historic markers at the traditional village centers, which I might even add as an action item.
That's a great idea.
That's a good idea, yes.
Markers is an awesome idea.
Well, I think Joe's even brought that up before. We just haven't pursued it yet.
I think it was
anybody?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, nothing.
Somebody's got some background noise. Do we know who that is?
Works with top carriers to provide maximum value to you, your family.
Somebody watching television? Perhaps. I think whoever it was muted himself or herself. Does anybody want to add anything in this stuff about the villages? I wouldn't object to adding some in here because we've talked about these issues in this last paragraph. You know, it gets to the zip code thing and the, you know, I go back and forth on this. I don't think it's the pressing problem that some people have presented it as, just because, I mean, you can go all up and down New England states and there's places with villages and people understand that the village is a part of another place. But the latter bit about confusion online, that definitely happens.
Yes, and it does happen around the post office issue and the delivery issue, whether you're in North Grovnerdale. It's very, very frustrating for some people who live in that section regarding mail and delivery. So may not be a town-wide issue, but it certainly is for those folks who are in that position.
Renee, you said you were going to talk to the new postmaster over at North Grovnerdale.
Postmaster, and I don't know that we'll get any further than what Ken. You know, we went as far as talking with Joe Courtney about using Thompson and then using the 4 zip codes, and we were denied, and we haven't been able to get past that. But I thought a conversation with him maybe, you know, it doesn't hurt to keep asking. And, you know, the question that keeps coming up is how come Killingly is doing it? And why can't we do it in Thompson? And I know there's an issue about yeah, like sections of with rural delivery and all of that. So that all plays into it, but we don't need to get into that now, but I will have a conversation with them.
Thank you. All right, so that's most of the historic bit, although Joe, I'd like you to stay on a little longer if you can, because I do think you have stuff to contribute here, which is section 6.5, municipal branding, a green and growing community. And I have to say, I'm not particularly happy with what I drafted here. I think it's dry, and I'm not sure that it gets to the heart of what we've been doing, but you guys give me your critiques as we go. In 2017 and 2018, Thompson contracted with NECOG to lead an extended branding study with the goal of identifying the unique assets and challenges faced by the town in order to develop strategies for marketing the community to prospective developers, new businesses, potential home buyers, and visitors. The full report is available here. Here's your link, or on the Economic Development Commission page of the town website. One of the first actions implemented from NECOG's recommendations was the formation of the EDC Branding Implementation Subcommittee. That subcommittee was tasked with acting on the remaining recommendations to develop a cohesive civic branding and marketing identity with supporting strategies. After many months of discussion, the brand Thompson, a green and growing community, was adopted, and the subcommittee has acted vigorously to create opportunities for Thompson residents to participate in the development of that brand identity and measures to advance it. The green and growing community brand slogan symbolizes many aspects of the town. Green represents our agricultural past, the beauty of our open spaces, our hope for an environmentally sustainable future, and even the color of money. We are growing in many ways, growing our economy, growing food in our fields, growing as individuals. Community acknowledges that we are interconnected and headed together to a common future.
Can you hold there?
Yep.
I just think this is all what was developed prior to us having the marketing company in place, and we're in that process. So I think some of the information would need to be incorporated here. I'm not saying eliminate this, but the new information that we got from that meeting that we had, there was a lot of, there was other information that I'd definitely like to include in this opening if we're somehow meld it with the green and growing, if we are keeping green and growing as one of our taglines.
Yeah, okay. I've got my marginal notes here to go back to Sullivan and Leshane's report. Okay. Having developed the concept, it now becomes possible to develop specific goals to reinforce it. The following suggested action items apply the idea of the green and growing community to the recommendations included in the NECOG report. In several instances, more specific projects related to the goals listed below will be detailed in later sections of the PoCD. The suggested actions below are those most closely related to brand development. So marketing strategy, and Renee, I think you're right. I think I should, bullet under bullets here, but using the plan developed for branding by public relations firm Sullivan and Leshane, establish a style book for all town communications, including logos, slogans, and taglines. Establish and maintain a promotional calendar for important town events, including annual promotional budget requirements. The combined style book and calendar will improve the cohesion of all marketing efforts across platforms and media outlets.
Kira.
Yep.
Were they? I thought that was something they were going to establish for us. Sullivan Leshane.
It is.
The style book. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay. I thought when we were talking today, it sounded like it was something we had to develop. But
no. No, this was more on the line of putting in an action item that we know is going to be done.
Okay.
It was giving us bonus points.
Good. Okay.
Social media, create and refine formal social media strategies and policies. And we had some edits to that this morning. I'm just reading it this here.
So
these will include.
Well,
go ahead.
I know we talked about these edits, but not in the group. That we were going to, we've got a social media platforms and strategies and policies. I think Terry and I agreed that we're going to continue to refine them. Just going to remove create because we do have that. That's all.
These will include an optimized schedule for daily posting and an improved use of analytics tools to better drive engagement with residents. Solicit content frequently from both official town sources and community contributors to keep posts fresh and interesting. And this is another one that doesn't reflect that it's already sort of in place. The social media policy will continue to evolve, let's say, with branding and with input by branding and other town committees and departments for implementation by the social media intern and other frequent platform users. Promote outdoor recreation assets. Develop online and print campaigns to drive attention to Thompson's key outdoor attractions, the Airline Trail and its related sites, Heritage Park, West Thompson Dam, Fort Hill Farms, etc., whatever we want to add in there. Work with Thompson Trails, Recreation Department, Agriculture Commission, EDC, Thompson Business Association, and individual private businesses to develop events at the key sites. Using the report developed by CHA, formerly known as CME, continue phased installation of wayfinding signs highlighting local attractions, pursuing grants for fabrication where possible. Continue development of the Great Trainwreck Park and other trail assets in alignment with the Trail Town report developed with assistance from the National Park Service. Solicit partnerships with trail racing organizations to establish Thompson as a top-of-mind destination for race organizers. Promote local agriculture. Offer assistance to local farms who want to increase their public profile. Develop annual agritourism events featuring the larger public farms. Work with local producers of all sizes to develop a regular farm market for Thompson. Posit out-of-the-box agricultural ventures to prospective startup farmers, hydroponics operations, aquaculture, solar grazing. Drive development to the downtown Mill District and Route 12-131 corridor. Compile a guidebook for new businesses and developers to help navigate local processes. The guidebook will emphasize the flexibility in uses and dimensional requirements recently adopted for those districts in the zoning regulations. Engage in regular conversations with residential and commercial real estate brokers in order to develop interest in key properties as they become available. Partner with Thompson Business Association and Thompson together to implement small-scale economic development projects such as, and I just gave this name today, the 11th Village seasonal retail chalets in Riverside Park. Set phased implementation goals for larger economic development initiatives such as the 65 Main Food System Business Incubator, including funding targets. And public engagement, continue to develop regular events to draw the public into the charismatic projects that advance the brand identity. What do we want to add? What do we want to change?
Can you scroll back a little? Yeah.
Tell me where you want me to go, Karen.
Promote outdoor recreation assets. I just have a problem with naming one private place amidst the public places.
Fort Hill Farms, you mean?
Yeah. I mean, we didn't say the Raceway. I mean, why? I don't know. It just seems weird to have one privately owned place mentioned.
Okay. Yeah, we can scrub that. I actually was thinking of adding the Raceway anyway, but I don't really think of it as an outdoor recreation asset. I guess the golf courses. I mean, yes, racing happens outside, but I guess I don't think of that as outdoor recreation in a pure sense. But regardless, the public versus private is well taken.
I mean, is Fort Hill Farms outdoor recreation?
Well, they
do the corn maze and.
But,
Yeah, but that's
Kira,
once a year.
you could just say, and private outdoor recreation assets, privately owned, so you're not naming it, and that could be, it could be the miniature golf down at, Riverside Pizza. So, I mean.
Or it could be the Beacon Hills farm, seeing the alpacas.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, that's a point well taken. What else, guys? I know you have more for me than this.
Well, I'm thinking about part of economic development that I don't think we have addressed specifically, but that is, commercial realtors, but what about commercial banking? I keep coming back to the fact that the town of Thompson banks with Webster Bank. Right now, you can't see it, but I'm wearing the shirt from the Rhymacarn Relay, and its only sponsor was Webster Bank. And I think that we should be finding some ways to involve any banking interests in the town into the matrix of economic development in the town.
Hey, Tara, didn't we have a section that was like grants tied to branding? I thought that was one of our goals.
Yeah, I just didn't, not for any particular reason, I just didn't get it in there. So let me just make that bullet.
And then I think, you know, maybe it's funding, like, you know, I mean, it includes more than just grants. It could be funding from a bank like Charlie's.
Sponsorships.
Yeah, I think that makes more sense, Renee, in terms of how does that relate to the idea of marketing and branding?
Well, you do list it, you know, listed pursue grants for fabrication of the signs, the sign thing.
That's true.
But I thought we had we do, and it wasn't in here earlier today when we looked at this. We talked about it, I thought. Maybe it wasn't.
We probably did, but then I went back into my office, deleted the entire old list, and put this entire new list in.
Or
what happens at the end of my day.
Could be confusing it with the branding plan that specifically had that listed as a goal, to pursue goals and funding to, you know, meet our objectives.
Yeah, it was definitely in the NECOG branding spreadsheet of actionables at the end. What we had in the original iteration of this was just a cut and paste of the letter that you had sent out to the Board of Selectmen and anything, and that's the one that had said what we've done.
Oh, yeah.
And that did include a lot of grants, but it wasn't an action list for next, which is why we replaced it with this. But grants and funding and building, you know, sponsorships and partnerships, I think I can probably work that in some intelligent way. What else do we got, guys?
Part of the intelligent way is having somebody from those banks, whether it's Webster Bank or Hometown Bank or Putnam Bank, from their commercial division, give us a few minutes of how they could be more interested and viable to developers coming into Thompson. You know, we're not necessarily endorsing any of them, but we're reaching out to any of these funding sources and saying, you know, this is what we're doing, and if you don't make yourself available, you could be missing some premiums here.
So what I'm hearing more from Charlie is different from what I'm hearing from Renee, although they're not incompatible. Charlie's talking about networking, and you know, talking about grants and funding. That's a pursuit process, which is not necessarily networking. That's a series of writing and data collection exercises.
And what does that have to do with local identity?
Well, it's under this. It's the building the brand. Right, so you build the brand in the networking. You build the brand by getting the funding to pursue your initiatives. I mean, maybe the funding piece isn't what we emphasize here, and more in the economic development section. But the networking, I think, has value as a branding measure. I don't know. I can be convinced of anything.
I think the banking business shouldn't be involved in local identity. It has nothing to do with the history and all the other fun stuff we've talked about. It's frankly, the banking has to do with economic. It should be in a different section. That's what I think.
Okay. And that is a later section. It gets its own treatment. I mean, what about any of these actionables? Is there anything that seems missing here? I mean, so we've added, you know, some form of networking, building sponsorships, whatever. I think the networking piece is more in line with brand building, and we can include the funding, the pursuit of funding processes in the economic development section. But what else, what else are we missing in this process of developing the modern identity, right? It builds on the past identity. Here in the modern era, we are encapsulating it into this brand, which we are advancing in by doing what?
One of the things that we might want to look at is that it would be possible to ride a bicycle on Thompson's roads all day long without ever leaving Thompson. We've got opportunities here. Well, we've got some would be off-road, but just by the natural loop that could be created, you could put in miles and miles of bicycle riding. And I think we need to look at how we can be more of a bicycle-friendly community as part of our outdoor recreation. We talked about this on wayfinding. We talked about this on some the grant that Rich Benoit brought up to you last week. And these are all elements that I think are part of the future. The event that we had to postpone in March and again in August, but look like they're going to be coming back around next year for people to be thinking of Thompson as a destination for bicycling.
Hey, Tara, you write in the third bullet, the Trail Town report that's going to be developed, is being developed. And that's going to be more than just the Great Train Wreck Park. It's going to deal with our other trail assets as well. And I imagine this conversation about bikeability is going to be in this report. So I don't know if we have to need to get into the details in this, if we've committed to align ourselves with this Trail Town report, as long as that kind of stuff Charlie's talking about is going to be in this trail report.
Yeah, yes, and we'll be specifically talking about bikeability in a couple places. We started it in the section on infrastructure because we made reference to, and I'm going to add more from the recommendations from that road safety assessment, which does talk about bike lanes and sharrows.
Yes.
And, yep. So at the end of this, in addition to each section having a little bullet points, at the end of this, I do want to put a really comprehensive to-do list, which essentially is going to include all the bells and whistles.
Yes. So it's going to pull
So whatever we're referring to obliquely in the bullet points, if you turn to that last appendix or that last section, that'll be the 10-year plan mapped out as I envision this. Hopefully I can make it happen. And, there's going to be, where's my table of contents? I mean, I think we're going to give it a lot of attention is the short answer. Sidewalks, bike paths, and trails in section 4. Starting to refer to it here. In section 8 under economic development, outdoor recreation assets and economic development, so tying it specifically together. Physical elements in transportation, pedestrian access and cycling access, recreation and trails.
Yeah, so I think that
I have every intention of hammering some of these points really, really hard. Because repetition is retention.
Yes.
And if we keep saying that it's important in several different ways and in several different places without being specifically redundant, then it builds the case for relevance. That's the principle on which I'm operating. And I would say that that's true of a handful of concepts I'm trying to bring into this. One of them is going to be that thread about housing stock diversity, housing affordability, missing middle housing, and pushing density in appropriate ways for financial, for fiscal responsibility. Those 5 points to me are one theme that can get broken out and reiterated in several places in this document to make those points. I think that's the value of, or one of the values of a document like this for internal, meaning town use. If it's going to have value as a guidance document, it should be guiding us in ways that we're intentionally choosing, and with that reinforcement. That's my soapbox for the day.
And I think that tool you talked about at the end is really, it'll be a great, whatever, if it's trails, then, maybe there's a key that tells you that, you can find something about trails in these 5 different sections or whatever it is. But I think that's going to be very valuable at the end of this, having that.
So an index as well, you mean?
Well, kind of like, I suppose, but I envisioned more of a detail kind of thing, but that's for later conversation.
Yeah. Anybody else have anything else on these sections or on anything we went through before? If anybody wants to add stuff, I wanted to make sure to get through all of section 6 while we had Joe, because he's got a meeting for his actual employer that he's got to get to. I've got the whole document here. I can scroll back to any of the sections we've already gone over if anybody had anything that they wanted to add since they were last discussed.
I have one small item.
Yeah.
We have a number of unique historical things that relate to lithic. Many people come to Thompson because they want to see carn fields. Every time we've had a carn walk at the Werge property, it's been over 100 people who come. Every time we have it. There's 7 or 8 other sites commonly. And I was just wondering if you're already talking about the outdoor assets and things like that. Would you even consider something like that? Because that is now annual. We do that annually to do the carn walk.
Yeah, I mean, I will add anything that we think is valuable in terms of describing what we want to perpetuate, what we want to create, what we want to capitalize on. I mean, my return question is, where do we put that? Is that in a section on outdoor recreation? Is it in a section on history?
Outdoor recreation.
Is it both?
I would say outdoor recreation, because where you're talking about the Great Train Wreck Park, essentially the Werge property is another form of a park, and it's sort of like Stonehenge for me.
I would put it in the section talking about historical assets, because I wouldn't want to identify in this document like the Werge property or other private property. It needs a curator. It needs that historical society. So maybe in the section that says the historical society, you could put something in that the historical society also leads.
Yeah, we're also the curator for it, just so you know.
So in that bulleted item, the Thompson Historical Society Advocacy, maybe there's a paragraph that says we curate the Native American heritage in the area.
That's not a bad idea, Joe. And then, because am I correct in assuming that almost all of these are on private property?
The town owns a fairly large area up near the tri-state marker that has some of these carns on them, but they're pretty nondescript. Then they kind of cover the whole side of the hill and over onto some privately held property as well. So most of it, I think, is private property.
Let me ask you this, Joe. Would it be worth you having a conversation with Carolyn about what it is you would actually want to communicate about these artifacts, because, you know, if they are predominantly on private property and they represent a preservation challenge, which some of them do, and also, you know, something that we want to curate access to.
Okay.
I'm tending to agree with Karen that it belongs more in the historical identity, historical landmarks and artifacts section, and also under that idea of your curation. The private nature of them, I think, does make it sensitive.
Every year we do 2 or 3 of these, but the big one is Carolyn Wurge's. It's public. We're not sneaking around at night doing it. We request permission, and we do it. So I'll draft some text. I'll send it to Carolyn and copy you, and we'll see what she's comfortable with.
Brilliant.
So just in that vein, Joe, there's supposed to be some Native American cemetery stuff on that behind the KFC.
Yes.
I mean, so that's another, like, an asset in town that may at some point be under your curatorial duties or whatever, you know, as opposed to it being recreation where we can just tell people, oh, go out there, because then we'll have people going and digging and stuff, and we don't want that.
Exactly.
Okay.
We have to be careful with that. Many people come here to come to our old cemeteries, by the way, too. I mean, that's one of the most popular things we get when people are contacting us is, can you tell us where the cemeteries are? I'll bet you we get 5 inquiries a week on that.
Wow.
I love a good cemetery myself.
Hey, didn't we talk about that, Tara, about having a cemetery walk, or has somebody done that?
I don't remember in particular that it was a topic for us, but it might have been, you know, so many topics come and go. I mean, I do love a good cemetery. I've got friends who are gravestone well, not exactly conservators, but they, my friend Brenda is the lead partner in a group called the Gravestone Girls. They'll actually be at the Maker Faire because they also do castings from stones. I have some hanging in my house, but Brenda does genealogical talks. She does lectures on the histories of colonial gravestones. She actually quit a pretty lucrative job at Clark's Shoe Company to do this full time a few years ago, and she's still banging away at it. But yeah, I mean, you know, cemeteries can be tourist attractions. Mount Auburn Cemetery is quite famous for it. Now that is a huge, beautiful, well-maintained cemetery with, you know, massive foundations and endowments. And, but it might be worth discussing that as something that, you know, we talk about it a little bit in the public works section, but we mostly talk about it as a challenge in that nobody's really maintaining them except a couple of volunteer associations and scrabbling.
That's what I remember now. It was Norma is maintaining a lot of these cemeteries, and I talked about this with Beth Goldsmith last month at the NIP collection, and that's where it came up that we should have since Norma knows about all these hidden cemeteries, that would be an awesome walk to do in October, because she apparently knows where some of these really hidden cemeteries are, and I guess she's gotten people to maintain them, or she's gotten a grant to help maintain them. So it was an interesting subject to me, and I had never heard about it, so I was interested.
Yeah, well, I'm making another marginal note about that as well. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind, Joe, again, it might be something you want to talk about with Carolyn, because she contributed some stuff about cemeteries under that section 4 to me. But again, it was in the context of where it fits in our public properties. You know, how do we maintain it? How do we keep them from degrading? You know, the potential of them as assets separately, I would really like to see that explored, because it certainly is historic. They are definitely green space. They are each one unique. you know, it's a different group of dead people in each one, and each of them has their own story. And I'll leave that to you mostly, but I like the idea.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Listen, I'll be glad to draft it. I mean, as I said, we get many people inquiring about it, and they're just dying to get in there. I mean, it's incredible.
Well, that sounds like
What do you think?
an action item, right?
That does sound like an action item.
Yes. And please don't die to get into the cemetery.
I'm just very upset you can't have home burials in Connecticut. I really wanted to be planted in my own backyard with a tree on my head.
Oh, well, maybe Chris will do it.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure I wouldn't have to ask him more than once.
Hey.
Action item regarding maintenance and development
Norma,
of cemetery.
obviously, Norma's your contact.
I have one point. I did not see anything about the Connecticut path specifically, and I know I got on a little bit late. I don't know if it was discussed ahead of time, but a lot is being done now to knit that thing back together and put some publicity onto it.
Well, we haven't talked about that particular project. If you have a blurb you can send to me, like from any of their standard talking points, I can take a look at it and see if I can feather it in somewhere.
Okay, we've already got some things up on the website, but I don't remember if they're under trails or history, but there's already some documents up there. I'll look it up. And I also heard you say that you were going to be making some edits onto this. When that's available, I'd be happy to read through it and see if I spot anything then. But I can't scroll.
Charlie, you broke up. What you broke up. I couldn't hear what you were asking me for.
After you get your next batch of editing done, then I will be happy to proofread it with you, and maybe some ideas will pop into my mind. But I'm breaking up.
Yeah,
here.
so
I think it's about time for me to. Signal is going.
Yeah, that's fine. Just so you know, what I'm doing, Charlie, is after each one of these sessions, I'm dropping all of the edits in and sending them back out. I'm going to try to get at least an outline for the next section. Also tomorrow if I can, but if I can't, then early next week, so that when we come together on, the group of us who are coming together on the 17th meet, which is from this group, just Joanne and Joe Perotti, if he's still listening in, that we'll have that to discuss, you know, just a skeleton draft to hang our hats on. But at the very least, the edits from today will be available to everybody tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have to work these things fast because we really only have until the end of December, because it turns out our PoCD actually expired last year, not this year. So we are already expired, and we only know this because Carolyn Wurge applied for a grant that they regularly apply for and found out that way. So I'm already in contact with the Office of Project Management. They know, you know, it's a formality to get sort of the grace period extended for us. But we absolutely must be done by the end of this year, which is as fast as we can possibly work given the schedule we're keeping anyway. So just some context. All right, Joey Amartino has to go. Charlie is breaking up. Does anybody else have anything before we log off for tonight? I am open to all of you.
I'm good.
Nothing.
Darren, Renee?
No.
Wonderful.
Joe, you got anything else?
I'm good.
All right, good. Good work, guys. I will get this out to you tomorrow. Thank you for giving up your time for this project again. And hopefully there won't be any more 3-hour meetings. If they go like this, I'll be pretty happy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hey,
Thank
I'll
you
see you
very much.
tomorrow.
Good
See you
night,
tomorrow, Joe.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Good
Tara.
night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Low fences out there about 3 feet high. That be a line as Meadows is